All right. I don't normally do this, but I have been reading the Following Jesus in a Culture of Fear, and I thought that I would share this chapter 2 with you guys. It says Fear and the Moral Life. If fear is, in fact, culturally pervasive and politically inescapable, the question arises, what does all of this fear do to us? What kind of people do we become if we are fed a steady diet of dread? How does fear affect our moral lives? Perhaps we may begin answering these questions with another question. Why speak of fear as a moral issue? If fear is an emotion, how can we say that an emotion is good or bad? We don't experience emotions as chosen, but as simply arising from within or washing over us. Popular wisdom tells us your feelings are not good or bad, they're just feelings. How then can we speak of them as being appropriate or inappropriate, moral or immoral? Theologian Simon Harrick gives examples that emotions are not always neutral. It's somehow wrong, he observes, not to feel revulsion at rape or to say forever angry with an imperfect parent. It is somehow right to rejoice at a friend's success or to be moved by the plight of an abused child. So it seems upon reflection that our passions can be morally praised or blameworthy. The Christian tradition tells us that the proper order of our passions, including fear, helps shape character. If we wish to develop the virtues of courage and hope, we need to learn what to fear and how much to fear it. But we can do this only when we recognize that our emotional responses are largely socially conditioned. Though the capacity of fear may be intimate or pre wired, the specifics of what we fear, when we fear, and how much we fear are largely learned. Scientific studies have shown this to be true in other animals. For instance, if a mother rat is made to be fearful and anxious during pregnancy, the baby rat will ex- exhibit fearful and anxious behavior as well. And if a new baby mate rats are introduced to this fearful mother, they too will begin to exhibit fearful behavior. Researchers Andreas Olson and Elizabeth Phelps describe how humans socially learn fear. You might fear a particular neighborhood because you were assaulted there, because you saw someone being assaulted there, or because someone told you an intimidating anecdote about a similar crime there. Thus, fear can be acquired through direct experience, indirectly through social transmit or indirectly through social transmission. In all cases, your fear of the locally might express itself similarly, such as by avoidance of the locality and increased autonomic arousal when approaching it. These responses might serve you well. However, if the experienced assault was a one-time event, the observed event a scene in a movie or the anecdote a distortion of reality, your responses might disrupt normal functioning, especially if the neighborhood was your home. Our passions are not simply given, but also formed. Thus, we can learn to feel the passions in the right way, at the right time, and to the right extent. To rejoice rightly at the triumph of the good, to lament rightly in the face of suffering, and to feel anger rightly in the presence of cruelty. Fear is not evil. It is not a vice. More on this in the next chapter. But excessive or disordered fear can tempt us into cowardice, recklessness, and rage. It can also inhibit other virtues such as hospitality, peacemaking, and generosity. Martin Niemöller was a German Lutheran pastor who opposed Hitler at the time when many Christians supported him. As a young man in 1933, Moeller met with Hitler as part of the delegation of leaders of the Evangelical Lutheran Church. Niemöller stood at the back of the room and looked and listened. He didn't say anything. When he went home, his wife asked him what he had learned that day. He replied, I discovered that Herr Hitler is a terribly frightened man. While fear itself is not evil, disordered fear can certainly breed and justify great evil. Attacked, attacked or contract. Fear is a moral issue insofar as it shapes the kind of people we become. And the kind of people we become has a lot to do with how we see the world around us. Our judgments about what is going on in the world and how to interpret events help us define proper actions. H. Richard Niebuhr went so far as to say that the first question of ethics is not what is right or even what is good, but rather what is going on. Before we can apply a rule, embody a virtue, or seek an outcome, we must interpret what is happening around us. Thus, in order to live well, we need to know how God is involved in history. To see Niebuhr's terms, the moral life is centered on the fitting response to the pattern of God's activity in the world. But what if we are unable to see God's hand in our lives or the world around us? What if, in a postmodern world, we are less likely to see a story in history and more likely to see randomness, chaos, and threat? Niebuhr seemed to recognize that for many it was becoming harder to see God at work in the world. We see ourselves surrounded by animosity, he writes. Hence, the color of our lives is anxiety, self-preservation, and self-preservation is our first law. In a culture of fear, the short answer to what is going on is we are at risk. We are in danger. Insofar as we accept that answer as our dominant description of the world. Our lives will be shaped by self-preservation. Our moral vision becomes tunnel vision. Fear becomes the ambient background to our lives rather than a proper response to a discrete threat. Psychologists have long taught us that fear in humans and animals provokes a fight or flight response. We either attack that which threatens us, hoping to overcome it, or we contract, hoping to avoid it. More recently, scientists have expanded the response palette to include freeze. Why do we freeze? Asks neuroscience Joseph Lido. It's part of a predatory defense system that is wired to keep the organism alive. If you are freezing, you are less likely to be detached if the predator is far away, to be detected if the predator is far away. And if the predator is close by, you can postpone the attack. Movements by the prey is a trigger for attack. Freezing is a form of contracting, a mode of avoidance that can be at times a very rational response to danger. But at other times, it's exactly the opposite of what is needed. 13th century theologian Thomas Aquinas gives an illuminating explanation of the contraction that comes with fear. He writes, fear arises from the imagination of some threatening evil which is difficult to repel, but that a thing be difficult to repel is due to a lack of power, and the weaker a power is, the fewer things to which it extends. Wherefore, from The very imagination that causes fear, there ensues a certain contraction in the appetite. That is to say, fear is produced in part by our judgment that we are not strong enough to fight off a threat. Lacking power, we withdraw to conserve what strength and energy we have in order to fend off the danger. In this context, Aquarians uses the Greek term systole, from which we get our English term systolic, referring to the contracting of the heart muscle as it pumps blood into the arteries. Fear for acquaintance can cause a contraction of the heart. By imagining some future evil, fear draws us in on ourselves so that we extend ourselves to fewer things. This is in turn can hinder Christian discipleship, which calls us not to contract but to extend. The ethics of safety. When we make safety and self preservation our highest goals, our moral focus becomes the protection of our lives and health. Security becomes the idol before whom all other goods must bow. In the past, we asked, what is your chief goal? Christians have answered friendship with God or to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. Westminster Kate, I can't read that. Catechism. Today, I suspect many Christians, when being honest with themselves, would name safety or security as the primary good they seek. Primary or highest good serves the function of organizing our moral lives around the things that is most important to us. The nature of a highest good is that we are willing to sacrifice other lesser goods for the sake of that which is most valued. If we seek to love God and neighbor above all things, the highest good, we might be willing to sacrifice certain creature comforts, lesser goods, in order to serve others in difficult circumstances. But if we seek safety above all things, we might be willing to sacrifice costly service to others in order to maintain the security we so deeply desire. And if safety is our highest good, then God cannot be. Frank Fiordi contends that fear has, in fact, transformed safety into one of the main virtues of society, making it an object of worship. He warns us the disposition to panic, the remarkable dread of strangers, and the feebleness of relation of trust have all had important impacts for everyday life. The outcome of these developments is a worldview which equates the good life with self limitation and risk aversion. Disordered fear has moral consequences. It fosters a set of shadow virtues, including suspicion, preemption, and accumulation, which threatens traditional Christian values, such as hospitality, peacemaking, and generosity. Thus, our preoccupation with safety provides a temporary, though artificial, solution to our moral fragmentation. We may not be able to reach much agreement on hard issues like racism, immigration, abortion, war, healthcare, sex, and poverty. We may not agree on what virtues are most desirable for a full human life, but we can all agree on safety. The new ethic of safety provides a least common denominator morality. Sure, we can all agree that we don't want to die. Surely we can all agree that safety is of utmost importance, since without life and health we cannot pursue any other goods. Our common fearfulness then takes on the appearance of a gift in that it creates a safety based unity among a populace otherwise fragmented by political polarization, information bubbles, and technological isolation. Such unity, however, is deceptive. Whenever there is a mass shooting, a common fear emerges among us, even if we live hundreds or thousands of miles away from the site of the tragedy. We sense that that this could have been us. In a strange way, it makes us one. We are then treated to prolong this community built on fear. Because as fragmented people, we want to linger in moments when we share a corporate mind and heart. In the end, however, such a community cannot last. Living only to prevent destruction, we neglect the calling to construct, to build a common life, and to seek common good. We are tempted to settle for a minimalist and passive ethic that says simply avoid pain, stay safe, and be careful. In our new ethic of safety, our moral language has been medicalized, lacking consensus about what is good or right. We justify our ethical claims by an appeal to safety. Sex is one area where this is especially true. It is easier to define safe sex than good sex. While good sex includes concerns about safety, safe sex often defers questions about what is good. In addition, the emphasis on keeping sex safe can set up sex as a fear filled experience that is intrinsically dangerous. This revised sexual ethic of safety comes at a cost of a proper understanding of sex as a good gift that need not be feared. So, when some Christians teach youth that what matters most is being safe and that either abstinence or condoms is the only safe way to be safe, they may gain some ground in controlling sexual activity, but in doing so, they replace the expansive question, how can sex be good, with the restrictive question of how can sex be safe. Traditional Christian ethics links sex and marriage not because sex is an intrinsically unsafe act, but because sex finds its fulfillment in the context of promises that ensure us of faithfulness and time. Regulating sex through fear may produce the restraint that some moralistic hope for but only at the cost of misunderstanding sex and reinforcing the idea that moral decisions have to do with safety rather than risky self-giving. Christians want to do more than teach young people to engage or not engage in certain behaviors. We want to teach them how to love God, love themselves, and love others. When we overemphasize sexual safety, we fail to help them see sex as part of the great adventure and risk of living in a covenant that mirrors to the world the beauty and thrill of divine love. Our youth need the ability to trust, risk, and sometimes defer certain joys because they have come to understand their sexual lives in terms of a bigger vision than personal pleasure or personal safety. When safety is worshiped as the highest good, we are tempted to make health and security the primary justification for right action. We thus lead timid lives, fearing the risk of bold gestures. Instead of being courageous, we are content to be safe. Instead of being hopeful, we make virtues of cynicism and irony, which keep us safe, which keep us a safe distance from risky commitments. We are more likely to tell our children to be careful than to be good. That extravagant vision that would change that extravagant vision would change the world gets traded for the passive axiom do no harm. Many people do bad things not because they are evil, but because they are fearful. The relentless pursuit of safety produces uncharitable hearts for we fear letting go of the goods that might protect us against an uncertain future. In the name of security, we refuse to love our enemies because we assume that if we do not answer violence with violence, we will be forever victimized. We do not open our lives to strangers, fearing they will take advantage of our hospitality. Fear makes Jesus' ethic of risky discipleship look crazy, unrealistic, and irresponsible. Yet of ethnic the virtues of the ethics of safety, suspicion, preemption, and accumulation turn out to be vices in disguise. Suspicion, don't talk to strangers. When my wife and I began talking to our children about strangers, we checked some books out of the library that dealt with the topic in a fairly balanced way. My music stopped. But the central message was clear: don't talk to strangers. Of course, we want to protect our children, but we did not want to teach them to identify the stranger with danger. We wanted them to be careful and to learn that hospitality is a virtue. At the time, there was an anti-crime billboard near our neighborhood featuring McGruff the crime dog. The message read, "When you know your neighbor, the bad guy stands out." My first thought upon reading this was that it was a great idea to get to know your neighbor. This is good hospitality and has added bonuses of making us safer. But as I thought more about the message, it began to concern me. For one thing, it was impossible to know all your neighbors, so all you could really know is what your neighbor predominantly looked like: white, black, Latina, wealthy, poor, young, old, walkers, drivers, and so on. The billboard asked us to equate the stranger, whoever did not look like one of us, with the bad guy. To be different is to be dangerous. Suspicion becomes a virtue in the culture of fear. If we assume we are always at risk, we will always treat others as potential threats. The deadly result of such calculations can be seen clearly in the killing of Trayvon Martin, a 17-year-old African American youth shot and killed by George Zimmerman, a neighborhood watch coordinator in the where Martin in the gated community where Martin's relatives lived. In the eyes of Zimmerman, Martin did not look like the neighbors. He did not look like he belonged. So by that logic of stranger danger, he was treated as a threat. The fact that Zimmerman was acquitted based on an argument of self-defense suggests that the jury, which included no African Americans, also agreed. Furedi tells of a stranger danger campaign in Leeds, England in 1988. Among the many messages that sustained the community was one false move and you're dead. Looking at the effects such campaign had on children, one study concluded we created a world for our children in which safety is promoted through fear. The message of campaigns such as one false move and you're dead is one of difference to the source of the danger. That such a world can be advertised without apparent embarrassment by those responsible for the safety of our children and without provoking public outrage is a measure of how far the unacceptable has become accepted. The mentality that turns suspicion into a virtue has become a commonly accepted part of American political landscape. A part of the American political landscape. After 9/11, airports became symbolic sites of security where the suspicious stranger was presumed to be dangerous until proven otherwise. Beginning in January 2004, Customs officers began photographing and fingerprinting all foreign visitors who entered the United States on a visa. In 2016, President Trump signed a travel ban suspending entry into the U.S. from 7 Muslim majority countries. Citizens of those countries were considered suspicious based solely on their nationality and presumably the religious identity attached to their nation. Such actions heighten the perception that certain foreigners, those who are least like white Christian Americans, should be treated the same way police suspects are treated. The treatment of the alien is an important biblical theme that suggests a very different response to strangers. After the exodus from Egypt and their return to the promised land, the Israelites found themselves dangerous found themselves facing dangerous enemies. Yet God commanded them, when an alien resides with you in your land, you shall not oppose the alien. The alien who resides with you shall be to you as the citizen among you. You shall love the alien as yourself, for you were aliens in the land of Egypt. I am the Lord the Lord your God. Leviticus 19:33 and 34. Today, we are quick to quote, love your neighbor as yourself. We are less likely to remember God saying, love the alien as yourself. We see biblical Israel enacting this welcome in the story of Ruth, where a Moabite woman is received, cared for, and gathered into the people of Israel. This pattern of hospitality plays an important role in the New Testament, where Jesus shares meals with the aliens of his day, foreigners and sinners, the sick and the outcast. Jesus' disciple did not learn this lesson quickly. One day, on their way to Jerusalem, Jesus and his disciples entered a Samaritan village where they were not well received. James and John knew just what to do. Ah, those sons of thunder. Lord, do you want us to command fire to come down from heaven and consume them? Luke 9, verse 54. But Jesus rebuked them. There is a tension in the biblical story between God's calling to welcome the stranger, the outsider, even the enemy, and the tendency to exclude and destroy those whose differences and diffidences is perceived as a threat. Suspicion can look very much like a virtue when people are afraid. Preemption. Do unto others before they do unto you. The second shadow virtue of the ethic of safety is preemption. Preemption can take the form of fight, flight, or freeze. As flight or freeze, preemption resembles Aquarian's notion of contraction, retreating from what might harm us. Some years ago, my wife and I attended a renewal of vow ceremony for some friends of ours. As the husband introduced the service, he admitted to the ways in which his own life had been far too determined by worry. He described the renewal of vows as striking a blow against the empire of fear, which, when I thought about it, made perfect sense. Marriage is an act that challenges our fears of abandonment, rejection, and failure. To marry is to confront those fears and refuse to allow them to determine one's relationship. To renew vows in a culture of fear is to close the back door of preemptive flight and to throw oneself totally and precariously into the hands of another, and for Christians to throw oneself and the other totally into the hands of God. Preemptive flight can prevent us from engaging life and love, from taking risks and accepting adventure. It is characterized by our own lost opportunities and possibilities. One writer tells such a story. For the past 13 years, a few days each week, I practiced social distancing by living 200 miles from my husband Michael. Not because I didn't love him, but because I loved him so much. My fear, if I were to leave my old life behind to be with Michael, losing him would mean losing everything. For our entire marriage, he and I had lived as if we each had one foot on home base, hesitant to run towards each other, scared to be tagged out. For fear of losing each other, they could not draw near. When preemption takes the form of fight rather than flight or freeze, we preemptively attack. This can be seen most clearly in politics. Whenever America has been driven more by fear than hope, preemptive violence has become ordinary. We comfortably justify violence not only in the fact of an actual threat, but in the face of potential threats. Examples abound. Though the doctrine of preemption was not created by George W. Bush, he was the first to name it in 2002 as a determining principle in U.S. foreign policy. This doctrine expanded the justified use of violence exponentially, since strong suspicion alone could warrant a preemptive attack. The practice of holding and torturing prisoners in Guantanamo Bay was justified as preeminently necessary. Torturing someone to get information, not as a punishment but as an interrogation technique, was said to help prevent future terrorist attacks. The reality that this almost never produced useful information was secondary to the spectacle that delivered two messages to the American people. We are keeping you safe, and we will stop at nothing to do it. These political messages continue to provide a reason to keep Guantanamo Bay open long after it ceased to have a purpose. The preemptive logic that stops at nothing to make people safe, even if that in turn makes people less safe, was on display after the Paris terror strike in November 2015. Responding to the attack, Donald Trump affirmed, "We are going to have to do things that we never did before, and some people are going to be upset about it. But I think that now everybody is feeling the security is going to rule." He then suggested that if Paris had less restrictive gun laws, it would have been much different situation. Trump was echoing Vice President Dick Cheney's statements after 9/11 attacks when Cheney said, "We also have to work a sort of the dark side, if you will. We're going to spend time in the shadows of the intelligence world, and so it's going to be vital for us to use any means at our disposal, basically to achieve our objective. It is a mean, nasty, dangerous, dirty business out there, and we have to operate in that area." In the face of fear, preemptive violence helps us feel safe that those who might be dangerous will be struck before they can strike us. The moral horror of this sometimes threatens to break through, but it is easily diverted by claims that there is no other alternative. In the song Devils and Dust, Bruce Springsteen, one of our great cultural commentators, explores what fear does to those entrusted with the task of violently assuring our safety. He imagines the plight of an American soldier guarding a military checkpoint. The song does not aim to judge the soldier, but to lament what constant fear will do to a person's soul. Springsteen sings, I got my finger on the trigger, but I don't know who to trust. When I look into your eyes, there's just devils and dust. I got God on my side. I'm just trying to survive. What if what you do to survive kills the things you love? Fear is a powerful thing. It can turn your heart black. You can trust that it'll take your God filled soul and fill it with devils and dust. By the end of the song, Springsteen alters the refrain from fear is a powerful thing to fear is a dangerous thing, reminding us that the fear inside of us may become more dangerous than the threat outside of us. The possibility that violence meant to calm our fears may actually kill the things we love became a reality for one man on a London subway in July 22nd, 2005. The incident occurred during the tense weeks after terror attacks rocked London's transportation system just one day after a second set of bombs failed to detonate. Jean-Charles de Menezes, a Brazilian electrician working in London, was being tailed by plainclothes police officers as he made his way to work. As he entered the Stockwell station, the officers chased him down, brought him to the ground, and shot him multiple times in the head. Fearing he was a terrorist, the police had engaged in a shoot-to-kill protocol. This protocol defined certain circumstances in which officers were directed to shoot a suspect without warning if they thought he might be ready to activate a bomb. The man, as it turned out, was simply an electrician making his morning commute. The London police and the British government referred to this incident as a tragic mistake, but this is precisely what we should expect from a strategy of preemption. It is predictable collateral damage to it is the predictable collateral damage of preemptive protocol. The very nature of preemption is to strike before the other person has struck. Only after the fact can one know whether the person was planning to strike or not. In this case, he was not. At de Mendes' funeral, Cardinal Cormac Murphy O'Connor cut to the heart of the matter when he urged people to not surrender to a logic of fear. Such logic turns the killing of innocents into a tragic necessity, lamentable but acceptable if it helps keep us. It helps. Lamentable but acceptable if it helps us feel safe. And then lastly, accumulation, save for a rainy day. Another way in which the ethics of safety distorts our perceptions is by tempting those with resources to accumulate wealth in order to stave off misfortune. Beneath this is a set of legitimate fears: fears of losing jobs, fear that social security will run out of money, fear that health insurance will not cover expensive treatments or long-term care. So people come to believe that the more they have, the less they need to fear. They accumulate to try to secure themselves against an uncertain future. This is far different from greed, they tell themselves. This accumulation of wealth is often called wise financial planning. A friend who is a financial planner once told me and my wife that we would need more than $1 million to retire comfortably. I laughed. I don't know I don't know what exactly she meant by comfortably, but the word suggests something far less than extravagance. Indeed, the very matter of factness of the statement carried a subtle warning that if we didn't have a grand sum tucked away, we would live uncomfortably in our older years. But what does all that pressure to hit the $1 million mark do to our ability to be generous here and now? In the Lord's Prayer, Jesus teaches his followers to pray, "Give us this day our daily bread." Matthew 6, verse 11. Jesus does not encourage us to pray for tomorrow or the next day or for enough money to secure a grand retirement. Rather, he calls us to be content with God's provisions for the day. Just a few verses later, Jesus tells his followers, "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth," verse 19 in Matthew 6. These teachings indicate that following Jesus will involve releasing our stored up goods to those who have needs now, so that we might be the means by which God gives to them their daily bread. Excessive fear closes us off from such vulnerability and from welcoming the daily gift of God's provision. With our moral lives so deformed by fear, how can we hope to live as non anxious recipients of God's gift? It might seem that the best response would be to rid ourselves of fear entirely, to live as fearless people, but fearlessness, as I will show in the next chapter, is a temptation we need to resist. So, that was that. I kind of want to know everybody's opinion. There's a couple of discussion questions. I don't know about those yet, but yeah.